Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Leslie Huey. I'm an associate professor of urban and regional planning at Taubman College, and we're incredibly grateful to be joined here by University of Michigan alumnus, twice over, undergrad and master's from the School of Public Policy, and the current Deputy Undersecretary in the United States Department of Agriculture, Stacy Dean.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dean is going to share her insights in a fireside chat on leveraging the USDA to tackle nutrition insecurity and systemic racism in the food system. Before we hear from Deputy Undersecretary Dean, I just wanted to briefly recognize everyone who was a part of making this happen. This was an idea that I didn't have. I actually was a little unsure if we could pull this off when one of the students met Stacy at an event at Eastern Market in Detroit. But we went with it because it seemed like an amazing opportunity if she actually said yes, and she actually said yes. So it was a group of students through the Transformative Food Systems Fellowship who worked with me to pull this off. I could never have done it by myself. So it's Sai Cheruvu. Raise your hand. Somewhere. Nia Dubon Robinson. There. Sammy Maldonado. And then we have also Frankie Douglas and Carlina Durango behind here, who we asked them to boldly come and facilitate the conversation. And then John Kent, who I'm going to pass this off to, who met Deputy Undersecretary Stacy Dean at Eastern Market. And I'm going to ask him if he could just say something briefly about what this fellowship is about, because we'd like to also bring visibility to what this fellowship is doing on campus. This is just one of many things that all the fellows have been doing. So I'll pass it over to you, John.
Thank you, Leslie. And peace, everyone. We appreciate you coming out. I'm the co-founder of Sanctuary Farms. It's an urban farm located in the Riverbend community on the east side of Detroit. I'm also a master's student in the urban planning department. I'm able to be a student at U of M because of the distinct honor of being a Transformative Food Systems Fellow. Being a TFS Fellow comes with some cool perks of paying for a good portion of my tuition and offers me a stipend. If not for this funding, I would not be able to afford this education or continue my work in Detroit. Other TFS Fellows relate, noting how this unique fellowship is the reason that they are at U of M pursuing their graduate school in general. So outside of the economic perks, TFS is more than just a scholarship. It's a consortium of students stemming from the School of Environmental Sustainability, SEAS, the School of Public Health, in Taubman College Urban and Regional Planning Program, who have come together to have a transdisciplinary conversation around transforming our food system. TFS has a major funding from the USDA and matching funds from the Rackham Graduate School in each of our programs, but only enough for 2 TFS cohorts. I and other TFS fellows felt it would be a shame for the program to end. We're now working on a coalition to galvanize funding to continue this much needed program. In Rackham's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan, it highlights a major goal by stating the vitality of the graduate student community will be strengthened through increased accessibility of graduate education, thereby expanding the diversity and inclusion of student viewpoints and backgrounds in graduate programs. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, the average cost of graduate school has increased by over 123% in just 33 years. The privilege and value of graduate school makes it an obvious choice for some students, but a financially burdensome choice for others. Research from Brookings point out that Black college graduates are almost twice as likely as white graduates to accumulate graduate school debt. Therefore, bold strides for change are necessary, and positive impacts have been demonstrated through the TFS Fellowship. In order to elevate diverse leadership and representation in food systems, the TFS Fellow aims to keep in existence equitable opportunities, such as the Transformative Food Systems Fellowship. And I'm kind of going off script here, but if all the TFS Fellows could please stand. Possible by Leslie Huey and other faculty. We thank you very much for your work and what you've done to help us get an education. Now back to the scheduled program at hand. And now I would like to pass it over to Ms. Amy Schultz to introduce our esteemed guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John and Leslie. We too have benefited from having 3 TFS Fellows in the School of Public Health and agree that we really should find a way to institutionalize this amazing program for the long term. My name is Amy Schultz. I am a professor in the School of Public Health in health behavior and health education, and also a university diversity and social transformation professor. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you a leader in public policy and a dedicated advocate for food security and nutrition, Ms. Stacy Dean. Currently, Ms. Dean serves as the Deputy Undersecretary for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. With a strong commitment to improving access to nutritious food for all Americans, Dean brings a wealth of expertise to her role, where she oversees critical programs aimed at fighting hunger and promoting healthy eating. Ms. Dean's academic foundation is rooted right here at the University of Michigan, where her passion for public service was fostered and cultivated. We're proud to claim her, as Leslie said, as a double Wolverine, go blue, having earned both her bachelor's degree in 1988 and her master's degree in public policy in 1992. Throughout her career, Ms. Dean has been a champion for shaping federal food assistance policy. Her journey is marked by significant contributions at numerous think tanks and governmental organizations, including pivotal roles at organizations like the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a leading nonpartisan research and policy institute. Ms. Dean's dedication to public service is evident not just in her actions, but in her collaborative leadership style, which underscores her tenure at USDA. Her work embodies a deep-running commitment to science-based policy development, equity, inclusion, and building sustainable food systems that offer economic opportunity and nutritional well-being to Americans. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Stacy Dean, a passionate policymaker and a proud alumna of the University of Michigan. We are honored to have her with us today for an insightful and inspiring fireside chat.
Hello. I think it's a basil side chat. That's like, it smells great.
It really does. All right, I can start us off. Can we hear well? Okay. So hi, everyone. Very happy to be here today with both Frankie and Stacy for this fireside chat. I am Carlina Arango, a Transformative Food Systems Fellow and a master's student at both the School for Environment and Sustainability and Taubman College of Architecture and Planning.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. My name is Frankie Douglas. I'm also a Transformative Food Systems Fellow. I am a first-year student in the School of Public Health, and I am in the Nutritional Sciences Department, so I'm studying to be a dietitian.
Right. Wonderful.
We do have some food systems questions coming up, but we wanted to start it off with a bit of a fun icebreaker question.
Okay.
And the question is, what is your favorite memory from your time here at the University of Michigan?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, thanks everybody for having me. I have 3 kids who are in college, and I told them that I was going to be doing this, and they were like, nobody's going to be there. It's 4 o'clock on a Friday. So, of course, I'm their mother. But I really thank you. It's lovely for you to be here, particularly on such a beautiful, beautiful day. And thank you so much to John for coming up and introducing yourself. And we had a great conversation. And thanks for making this connection. I'm thrilled to be here. So, I lived here. I went to undergrad here. I lived here and worked actually in an architecture firm and then went to grad school here. So I have a lot of Ann Arbor memories. But I think I was just talking with Professor Schultz that I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, and a big part of coming here was expanding my world. So, I had Thai food for the first time with my college, my housemates. I heard Indonesian music for all of these firsts occurred here in Ann Arbor, in really, and so it just felt like this world expanding time. So I don't know that there's one. I think it's just being on that journey with your best friends was really wonderful. So I'll just give a whole answer rather than a specific one.
Nice.
That's beautiful. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing. Yeah.
So I'm going to kick us off with the food system-related questions. But understanding your background in public policy, what drew you to food and specifically food access?
So, I graduated with my public policy degree and went off to Washington, D.C. and got a job with the Office of Management and Budget. And I was a budget analyst. And it also, like the work that we did at the IPS, now the Ford School, was sort of a jack of all trades, right? You used all these different skills in that particular job. It was great. And while I was there, a few years into my tenure, President Clinton was advancing his welfare reform law, and it was my job sort of to keep track of the cuts in that bill. So he had put forward a proposal to change cash assistance and sort of the array of supports that went to low-income families, and in order to do that, he had to come up with a bunch of cuts in order to pay for it, just under the rules of the budget. Anyway, he had his vision, Congress had their vision. It was pretty cantankerous, and it was a difficult time, much like we see now between the administration and Congress, not necessarily agreeing, and big ideas are tough to do. But that one moved forward, and it was pretty controversial. But a lot of the offsets were cuts to food assistance. And also cuts to people with benefits for people with disabilities, and that was sort of my job, was to keep them all racked up and straight. And I have to say, it was really hard. It was a very so I didn't have any insight really until the good things that were happening was just all of the things that were going to make folks' difficult life more difficult. So I'm just, I'll tell you that I had a lot of, I didn't enjoy that. And so ended up deciding to leave OMB and go and work at an organization called the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and worked with their food assistance team. And for me, it was just kind of like a little, the abacus was uneven. I had been involved in something I didn't feel good about, and I wanted to move to something that I did feel good about. So that's what got me there, and I'm sorry this is long-winded, but
No,
you're asking
this is
an old
great.
lady her tales. But what happened was, in doing that, and right, everyone's journey is a little, not always a straight line. I joined an incredible community. The food world, particularly the anti-hunger world, first of all, people stay in it. It's got so much heart. I mean, just unbelievable. Folks are there for the mission, the passion. There are people who work in food banks for decades, or they'll work on, being an advocate, an anti-hunger advocate. I've known them now for decades, but joining that community, joining that mission, joining that sense of purpose it felt like being welcomed home in a way. And so that is a big part of what kept me there. And of course, the problems that we face. Hunger is an expression of hardship. It's an expression of inequity. And it feels, the mission of trying to make sure that we live in a community, a neighborhood, or a country where people don't go hungry is it's something that I guess it just gives, it gives me purpose in my work. So that's the long path, and unfortunately there's too much work to do, but also feel like I can also see some of the seeds that were planted and that are growing into a stronger set of supports.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the people are amazing. So you guys are joining an unbelievable, this is where you stay, it's a good space.
Thank you for sharing that. It's like very affirming to just know things are not linear and that people go in all these different ways, and sense of purpose is a big kind of guiding factor. So thank you for sharing that. So we kind of touched already on this in your response, but as we know, there are many complex issues in food systems. And so we're wondering, what are areas of particular interest to you in your office when it comes to food systems?
Right, so so I am a Biden-Harris appointee, right? And sort of my job is to help make sure that at USDA and the Food and Nutrition Service we're carrying out the president's agenda. And I think there are a couple of things in the food space. He did convene a White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health, the first in 50 years. It was a pretty amazing event, but it really lifted up a lot of the themes that are important to him in this space, and then of course us at USDA. So one is the connection between food and health. We are trying to move beyond, you've probably all studied what is food insecurity, the Census Bureau metric, which they work on with USDA, food insecurity, which is incredibly important and very powerful, but and it has an implied in it sensibility of access and adequacy to healthy food, but it feels as if it lives in a food sufficiency space. We're trying to push beyond to a phrase we call nutrition security, but you can call it what you want, which is not just to be fed, but to be fed well, to be fed and to have access to safe, healthy, affordable food that supports health and well-being, right? That is a more aspirational goal than calorie sufficiency. So they're seeing the connections between food and health. Of course, it makes so much sense from a healthcare system, right? We have an unbelievable problem in health driven by diet-related disease. So thinking food more holistically and in a more aspirational way for what it is essential to and fundamental for is a big thing. I think another part of that is also, for me, is the working from trying to drive equity into these systems. Again, I talked about, we have food insecurity, diet-related diseases are something that are experienced far too much in this country. But the rates and who experiences these things is quite different by demographic group. So single mother-headed households, 3 times the national rate. Communities of color, 2 to 3 times the rate, depending of their a comparable white demographic. Depending upon which group you're touching upon. So, that hardship is not equally experienced. So reducing the number isn't enough. You've got to reduce the disparity in who's experiencing. And I guess I would just say the food insecurity is in many respects, or hunger, just the more simple English language term, is a downstream problem, right? It comes from inequity in the labor market. It comes from redlining. It comes from a whole array of drivers that result in someone not having the ability to access healthy, nutritious food that's good for their overall well-being. So to me, it's sort of like a barometric pressure of how other systems are doing. And that's, I think, also partly how we're thinking about it, is when we do better in housing, we'll do better in food. When we do better in basic income supports or health coverage, we should do better in food. And so there's not time to go into the president's entire agenda, but the fact that I'm working for an administration that's thinking about all of those pieces is really, it's rewarding for someone who's been in the food assistance space for a long time. So yeah, we're trying to do a lot. So those are the big pictures, right? We have policy initiatives under all of those, but and happy to talk about any of them. But that's kind of what I'm trying to bring to the table.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about how identities kind of affect access, and obviously we know our identities can affect a lot of aspects of our lives and how we experience the world. Could you speak about what being a woman in a mostly male-dominated space or male-dominated spaces, agriculture, politics, has meant for you?
That's an interesting question because, of course, as a woman, I'm walking in that space. So sometimes I don't always know why I'm doing it. But let me give that a shot. Also, the other thing is food and nutrition. A lot of ladies, I'll just say. It's
Fair,
nice.
fair.
Men have been in charge when I started. It's less true now. And I certainly think in my team, we see a lot of female leadership, which is, but yes, then I walk down the hall to the ag world, and it's a little bit different. I guess, and it's funny, I'm wearing my spider pin, which someone was asking me about this.
I was noticing it.
Well, spiders are powerful women. They are mothers and weavers and providers, and this is sort of like when I want to make sure I've got my confidence up, I wear my talisman here. I think part of that is, one is recognizing that there are, I would say having been a mom and having had the struggle between work and family life, that is something, less and less a woman issue, which is great. It's a parent issue, but I think that's something I try to bring is making sure that these incredible young people who might be going through whether it's kids or family or other things that are pulling you away, right? That doesn't mean that you don't have enormous things to offer in the workspace. And creating flexibility, giving grace, letting folks live their life, and then also think about how they're bringing their best selves to work. That, I think, is something that comes from having had to push against those doors quite a bit. I think also having experienced, doors being closed, conversations, thinking, that's not available to you, trying to always be mindful of, are we keeping the doors wide open? And being mindful of the fact that I'm not seeing problems that others are experiencing, right? But people didn't see what I was experiencing. I'm not seeing what others are experiencing, and trying to ask and trying to be open. I think that's important. But and trying to be yourself, right? That's all you can do. And so letting others be themselves as well.
And you really touched on this. You already spoke to this, but if you have anything to expand on, how are you using your power to provide more equitable access to USDA resources for women and other underrepresented groups? So you spoke about having a more flexible environment for parents and things like that, but are there any things you didn't touch on that you would want to expand?
Well, a couple, I guess I'll pull back maybe. There's both policy and then how we work at USDA and the Food and Nutrition Service. I would say we are trying to set the table differently, who's invited to the table. So, for example, a very big priority for us is tribal food sovereignty, right? The federal government has had a terrible history with respect to stripping Native Americans of their land and taking away the ability for tribes to provide for their people, right? That's just been overt policy for centuries. And so how you step back and seek to create, there just needs a very big power realignment. And there are a lot of, we have treaties, we have very specific rules of the road around how to respect sovereignty and work with tribes as sovereign nations. But it also just means resetting the table and recommitting the time and energy and really shifting power. So that's something we're working on. We're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination, but and we try to shift from language of allowing tribes to do, for example, to inviting tribes to pursue what is appropriate for them. Similar with territories, again, really problematic power dynamic with respect to food and food systems there, unbelievably unjust situations with, again, food disparity and diet-related disease, trying to change the power dynamic there to respect and pursue parity. So you can't just declare, well, I want territories to have parity, that you have to completely reimagine the relationship and your place in it. So those would be two examples, and it's just a lot of talking to different folks who haven't necessarily been invited, don't necessarily have sophisticated Washington lobbyists coaching them on how to engage with the government and making yourself available in a different kind of way. It's important.
That's a great segue to actually our next question, because it touches on this painful history that is connected back to the USDA. So Tarana set it up first. Many communities of color and Black farmers in particular do not trust the USDA because of a history of discrimination. For those of you in the audience who may not know about this history, a prime example is the 1999 Pigford versus Glickman class action lawsuit against the USDA. That's the largest civil rights settlement led by Black farmers who were denied USDA loans and services for decades. And so we understand that you do not work directly with farmers, but we are curious to know, as the Deputy Undersecretary for Food and Nutrition Services, in what ways are you able to acknowledge this painful history, which you already touched on, but if you want to expand on that more, and work towards reparative justice in the USDA? So if you want to expand more on tribal.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Well, no, and I think, I'm at the leadership level at USDA. We do actually do a lot of work with farmers, but we owned the responsibility for advancing and improving making our future more responsive to all the people that we served in our past. So look, we are known as the People's Department, and I think that's an example of where we very obviously were not serving all of the people that we were meant to serve. So again, coming in under this administration, and both, again, the president and the secretary were very clear to, one of the first executive orders the president signed was around equity. So I guess maybe I'll just highlight a couple of things that we have been working on, understanding that it's a journey. So the first thing is naming, acknowledging, spending time, understanding, saying these things are real. Let's internally understand and talk, let's name the problem, let's talk about what caused the problem, and really spend the time socializing within the department that this happened, and it happened right within these walls, how do we make sure that it doesn't happen again? So that's ongoing work. It also means, because of that, and that's not the only example, I think, of where we know we haven't been lived up to the expectation of ourselves, is the secretary actually asked for an external equity commission. And we had, I can't remember how many people were on it. It might have been something like 30 folks. We took applications from people from around the country and set up an independent equity commission that ran their own process for looking at equity issues across USDA, and we helped staff it, but the idea was they were going to come up with their own independent assessment of where work and remedy needed to occur. They published their report, and we are working through their recommendations. And we are actually on an equity tour across the country. There was recently an equity commission held a meeting in Detroit to talk about, I think, urban agriculture. Next week, I'm in South Texas to talk about food equity and support for farmers in the colonias. So that's part of it, is bringing external spotlight. Then Congress has given us resources, for example, to not necessarily respond specifically to Pigford, but a number of other areas where we haven't had equal access. And we understand we're probably not the best people to be not always the best people to be the ones saying, come on in and apply for this support, right? I know it didn't work before, but we promise it'll work now. So we have contracted with third-party community partners to help be trusted intermediaries, so that farmers and communities in need of our support can go there rather than come to us. So and then each mission area within USDA, and there are 8 mission areas. I'm one of them. Others are like forestry, farming, research. We each had to develop our own equity action plan. And again, all of this is public, and the idea is to to create accountability on forward movement. So I brought ours, and someone can look at it and say, that's not enough. Well, we need to hear that, and also then we have to report out on how we're moving forward. So it gets bureaucratic and big government pretty quickly, but just gives you a flavor of the elements of how we have to start the journey. We don't expect to fix things in a year or two, and that's also a really important mindset, but that we've got to show and demonstrate commitment, momentum, and accountability. Yeah.
That's exciting. Like I feel like it's so easy to not know what's going on behind the scenes, and it's really nice to hear from you, like some of those efforts. So many of us in this room are or will be practitioners in the food system space. Like I am in nutrition, and we have people in the environmental justice space, and et cetera. And so I'm wondering, what suggestions do you have for students in this room today who want to make a transformative difference in the food system?
Oh, well, that's interesting. So how do you think, what does the word transformative mean to you?
I mean, it's like a combination of like tear things down and build at the same time. Okay. It's like assessing everything that's going on and, I don't know, working together as best as you can to address each little thing. I mean, there's so many ways that you could look at the food system or think about the food system. And so for me, it's just kind of like not just accepting the food system happening to us, but like, working together to actively
Got it. Well, the reason
it might be different things to different people.
That's true. Well, it's a big word, right? So one of the reasons I asked is that, I oversee 17 federal feeding programs in this great job that I have. And for example, WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children program, right? It's an amazing public health intervention program that offers a variety of services to families with young kids, including a prescription food package. And so I get to go visit these clinics where you get to see little babies, and I'm so happy. And but the nutritionists who are working with those families and who are helping introduce new parents to early feeding practices, or encouraging eating a little bit more this way than that way. To me, that's transformative, right, for that family. The work that they do, and these are some of the most inspired people I've ever met. They love what they do, and who wouldn't? They're helping young families, or new families, not always young, but new families, setting them on, just helping give them this kind of support and need that new parents want to support healthy eating and overall good health. So it's a pretty joyful space. But then there's also the work that someone at the Food and Nutrition Service gets to do by writing a rule, a regulation that will affect millions of people. At FNS, our programs, the 17 programs, serve 1 in 4 Americans every year. So our perch is pretty extraordinary. And if like we just did and WIC said, we're going to add more fruits and vegetables to the program, that means millions more children will have that. Or we have a new school food standards rule coming out, and we had proposed, for example, to curb sugar a little bit in the school meals program. That could also have a transformative system. Or here in Michigan, the school meals program through your state legislature offers 10 extra cents for every meal to purchase locally. We like that, yes, that's right. And that's partly what we were doing in Detroit, was visiting. So when a school district has to purchase local, right, you're starting a conversation that they might never have had with local producers, local food hubs, and it starts to just seed an economic exchange that can help support a local food system. So, right, there's this huge range in transformative. of what it can be. And I think they're all, part of it is where do you get your juice, right? Like, is it the one-on-one interaction? Is it thinking about getting 12 people to talk to each other that wouldn't otherwise? Is it sitting behind a computer and writing a regulation? Like, you got to go with what excites you, but you can make change everywhere. This morning we were in Toledo. I was visiting with about maybe, what was it, like 30 people from that community, that county, that were all focused on feeding folks as well as the healthcare system. And they, whether it was seniors or kids, the WICs, school meals, a food bank, a halal food bank, it was, they all were playing their part. And we actually felt like we were seeing the food system in that conference room. So I would say you can be transformative anywhere you sit.
It's kind of about having that foresight and oversight to be able to see it all happening. I mean, you have me pumped up. I'm interning with WIC and 10 cents a meal this summer, so I'm like,
oh, all right, I'm
I'll
checking
be
your boxes. Yes, you will. You absolutely will, right? And yeah, I think you can you can have a huge impact wherever you sit. It's just how you're going to measure that. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is more on a personal level question. We understand the work can be, it can be difficult and sometimes even defeating to work in food systems. However, it's also uplifting and has gratifying moments. And so this last question is that we have prepared for you is, what gives you hope in the work that you're doing?
Oh, wow. Well, honestly, the people I get to work with, the Food Nutrition Service is about 1,700 people. They believe in the mission of what they do. And then you go out and you meet folks and who are also just as inspired and excited to be in this space. I mean, and it's the little things. I recently got to visit a school in DC. We were celebrating National School Breakfast Week, in case you missed it. You can get your cards next year for. But it's our opportunity to celebrate this program, and was sitting at a table with a little boy who was eating an apple, and we had the farmer who grew the apple sitting at the table. And those kids, like this farmer, he was such a rock star. So the kids were going, "Did you grow this apple? Did you grow this apple? Did you grow this apple?" Right? And just the joy, the absence of food and the absence of high quality food is heartbreaking. But the joy that comes from food, right? And the people who are a part of growing it and delivering it and making it, and I don't know what else to say, but it's really energizing and very exciting, and it's a great space to be. You guys have chosen well.
At this point, we want to open it up for more questions. A lot of the students who are in the TFS seminar are here, and they always can. It's all it is them asking questions. So I know they'll have a lot of questions, but we want to allow anyone to open up any conversation. Doesn't have to be on the lines that we've already been talking about. Another TFS seminar student.
Hi, Deputy Undersecretary Dean. My name is Allison Perez. I'm a first-year PhD student in the American Culture Department. But prior to August, when I started, I was a senior policy analyst at the Food Research and Action Center for many years. Yeah, at FRAC. I worked with Crystal Finn-Simons on the child nutrition team. So we have met before. We've been in many meetings before, but you probably don't recognize me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's all good. It's all good. But what you said about the anti-hunger space and anti-hunger advocates really resonated with me. I once a fracker, always a fracker, and once an advocate, always an advocate. And so something that has been sitting sort of heavily with me of late is thinking about summer EBT for this summer. This is the first, for those who don't know, summer EBT is a program that was piloted for many years prior to the pandemic. You guys just put out an awesome report about that pilot and all of the great things that it demonstrated. And then we got to see it in action nationwide with pandemic EBT, which was one of the working on that with my team and with USDA and with all of the anti-hunger advocates across the country is probably one of the things I'm proudest of from my time at FRAC. But I am, especially the past couple of years, and seeing how many states didn't uptake PEBT, and this summer seeing that there are still 14 states that haven't decided to implement summer EBT. I'm just really curious to hear about what you all have learned in the lead up to this summer, implementing this program nationwide, and what you are planning to do moving forward. Obviously, the summer hasn't happened yet, so we won't see what happens until after the summer, but what do you plan to do moving forward in terms of gearing up for the summers to make sure that more states do take it up and aren't playing these partisan politics with kids' access to food over the summer?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you. FRAC, and sounds like you have been an incredible champion of childhood hunger and making everyone aware of it. So, and FRAC was an extraordinary leader in the fight to create this new, I mean, it's pretty awesome to be the person who gets to roll out one of the first new federal feeding programs in about 40 years. And it's a program that is evidence-based, right? We have demonstrations, we have very robust research, bipartisan, and I would say, although I'll talk about that in a second, we have 37 states, DC, all 5 territories, and 2 tribes taking up the program. So we have a lot of incredible momentum to make sure that the children who normally would be eating free and reduced price breakfast and lunch at school, 30 million kids every month, during the summer months, summer hunger spikes up for them because they don't have access to these meals. And there is a summer feeding program, but only about 1 in 6 kids who access free and reduced price lunches are able to find a site where they can eat during the summer months. So summer hunger is a very real issue, and an important priority for the president at the White House conference said we need to tackle summer hunger, and summer EBT would be the way to go. And we, through Senator Stabenow's leadership, along with Senator Bozeman from Arkansas, but just talk about a powerful woman and tenacity, always with a smile on her face, but oof, she is tough. Anyway, they worked together to pass this remarkable new program. And it's an option, which, too bad, but okay, but it's an option. And states had a very short period of time to sort of stand up the infrastructure and get it rolling for this coming summer. But 37 plus the territories and tribes took it up, and we can't wait to roll it out and help parents, just give parents a little bit of help. So the benefit will be $120 per child for school-age kids over the summer. All right, sorry, that was the big infomercial. But you're right. So why wouldn't you take this option? Why? So let's spitball that one. Can I just be a professor for a second? Why wouldn't you take is there a reasonable reason why you wouldn't take it? I mean, one might be you're not ready and like you really don't think you could pull it off operationally and you don't want to botch it and you want to wait a year to get it right. Not a great, I mean, I respect that reason, but any other reason why you wouldn't want to? So we've got 21 million of the 30 million kids covered. Yeah, they have said that, yes. Or maybe you have a philosophical bent against taking federal funds. It's not really about the recipient. You just don't want to introduce more federal support into your state. Honestly, I'm mystified. This is a phenomenal opportunity to make sure a very real problem is addressed. It helps families, helps parents. It's bringing resources into the community. Retailers are, hospitals, nurses, teachers. This thing's got a lot of love. So I'm hoping that with the extraordinary success of this summer, that states that have been maybe waiting maybe they're a little cautious. They want to see how it goes. They are swept up in the enthusiasm of it. Maybe they were waiting for resources from their state legislature because they do have to put up a match. So I think something this obvious sells itself, and I'm very hopeful that we will have coverage across the whole country. That's certainly what we want to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Bauer. I'm a faculty member in our Department of Nutritional Sciences. And also I've been leading a project for the past 3 years, Feeding Michigan Families, where we have collected the lived experience of food insecurity and food assistance in this state. So I have a lot of thoughts and anecdotes about how SNAP and WIC and everything works here. But in particular, I was interested in your comment earlier about, right, that food insecurity and hunger are a manifestation of a long line of failures, right, in economy and housing, and that's absolutely true. And right, it intersects with food assistance too, because we have families who can't use all their WIC benefits because they don't have transportation to the store by the end of the month, right? It's
Right, yeah, you can only use WIC in the month it's
within
issued,
the month,
yeah.
So it's, or up in the UP, there's a lot of snow, they tell us, and they can't use all their WIC benefits. But so I would love to hear more about like sitting inside USDA, but yet partnering or aiming to improve, issues that are led by other areas of government, like housing, like cash assistance, whatever else you're thinking about.
Yeah, well, obviously those agencies have the lead, but for example, there are some things that we know work, but we've made a decision not to commit the resources. So for example, childcare for families with young children is a hugely important expense, and can really, whether childcare is in the family or not, has a lot to do with whether parents can work, or is there money can I shift money from childcare to the car or to the rent or which neighborhood I live in. So right, that's one where the administration has put forward a very repeatedly a very significant proposal to say, hey, let's double down on childcare as a transformative investment so that more women can be in the workforce, and anyway, to me, it's just very sensible policy. So just when I go and talk with groups about kids, so if I go to a WIC audience, right, they are focused on WIC, but they also really care about childcare because they're serving those families. So what we try to do is just make sure that there's broader awareness of that we see the whole family too. Same with healthcare, right? Making sure that families have access to healthcare. And then housing was a particularly acute issue during the pandemic, but it is a major driver of food insecurity because it is such a big expense. You can't just, it's a hard one to shave off bits of. So I think we try to be very aware of that and then think about, okay, well, we have families who are struggling with housing, so how is that showing up in the food programs? Maybe they move a lot. So having the ability to report a change of address or call that in as opposed to having to, let's say, physically go in and say I've moved, would be responsive to what's happening, which is a very real thing that like families have to move. So I think that's part of how we're trying to be mindful of the whole family as well as the whole federal family's response. And also for us to validate that investments in housing are investments in food security because we don't want communities warring against each other. These two things are very tied together. So maybe those, and thank you for all of your work. We have trouble sitting where we sit to get to spend a lot of time directly with families, and so it's so important that community groups like FRAC or researchers are pulling that together. We also need to do better, I will say that, finding ways with all of our rules to connect with direct recipients of our programs, which are administered largely by states. But I really can't thank all of you who do that work and then share it up with us enough.
See the hand over there, and then in the back.
First off, I want to say the only time I've heard fracker in a good context is today.
That's true.
You learn something new every day. The second point is that I'm really happy to see the progress that the USDA is taking serious urban agriculture. That's taken quite some time. But there's still more of a favorable access to resources for our rural communities because that is where most of our food production happens. It was interesting to hear your background in architecture. I didn't know that. So this question is in line with what is the USDA doing in terms of their landscape to incorporate urban farming as a real potential driver for national security? and also making sure that folks in our most vulnerable communities in urban spaces are getting the resources they need. And just to provide more context, I see this as a real need, being that our populations in cities are only increasing. Climate change is happening, and thusly that is going to affect where people are living. So to ask that question again, what is the USDA doing to increase resources for urban agriculture?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's not just urban ag, but urban forestry too. So, right, part of our design and our structure comes from the way Congress set us up and the way Congress funds, decides to fund farming. And so you can imagine the agriculture committees do have a really rural orientation given who seeks, historically, but given who seeks to be on those committees. Today, I think it's actually changing up a bit recently, but if you look over the past decades, that's the case. So one of the things that Congress passed early on in the president's tenure, the American Rescue Plan, which provided USDA with a significant amount of flexible resources to address hardship related to the pandemic in the agriculture space, as well as to work on building more resilient food systems respond to hardship and think about what we can do to invest in the future. And so the secretary did, that's where we had flexibility, said let's set aside funds specifically for urban ag as well as urban forestry. And was dedicated investments in that particular space. That we hope, and that has happened with respect to food hubs, trying to offer local, for example, help, what's the right word? Address concentration, for example, in certain industries, for example, in meat packing, or in tribal food sovereignty, having a mobile meat packing a unit so that could move across small rural areas and tribal lands, for example, for processing. So these flexible funds were put in and gave him the ability to say, all right, where can we invest that will help more resilient food systems as well as urban ag that were really non-traditional, and because he had a tremendous amount of flexibility. So he's been doing that and my partners across USDA have been doing that. We also receive some of those funds. And I think that becomes then sort of the test case, the proof, how we prove the point that these are areas where we have a tremendous opportunity to, and are worthy of future investment. So, and I think climate smart ag investments is a great example there, where we're saying, let's figure out ways to bring farmers resources that will also help sequester carbon. Might not have been something that aligned with traditional ag structures, but under these flexible approaches does. And then what we've seen is completely oversubscribed because of what you're talking about. There is an incredible need, interest, desire to help build up that infrastructure with federal support. And so that's our hope, is that we, through the success of these efforts, and in some cases perhaps not perfect success, but we learn, we can then go back with smart asks for the future. And then that urban ag farmers who are supported also can go and engage with Congress on what they need with the success of the investment. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Nadia Shakir. Thank you so much for coming. I actually was a part of the first Transformative Food Seminar course last year. I just wanted to ask, so my mom is in basically like lower middle class. So she makes about like 40 to 45K a year. And since she's taken on this job, we have not been able to receive food stamps. I think as much as we can receive is like $12. And because of the increasing, living costs, it's been like sometimes a struggle to get groceries. And we have received pandemic benefits because I have a younger sister that is in high school, but it has not been renewed since the pandemic, like 2021 from 2022. And so my question basically is there any work being done to increase food stamps and SNAP benefits to people that are low income or lower middle class, especially with the increasing economy and just increasing living costs over the past years with inflation and everything.
Yeah, thanks for your question. And maybe afterwards we can follow up to make sure to think about some specific advice, which we don't want to probably do in a big room. But I think your question really illustrates one of the challenges that we have in SNAP is if you just read some news outlets and listened to some people, you would think that everybody in the country was able to get SNAP and was not using it necessarily for really critical purposes. But in fact, it's a highly targeted program. The eligibility limits are quite, what's the right word? We say targeted, but they're pretty limited. As folks start working more or are able to get a job, and then they see what we experience, a benefit cliff, right? They shift from having the benefit but then working and losing it, or perhaps the level is too low. And again, we can talk about the details. So I guess I'm taking your mom's situation and pulling out. And that is a real dilemma, is that you create an unemployment or an underemployment trap where, it can be quite scary to think, wait a minute, if I take that job and I lose maybe my health and my childcare and my food, is it worth the risk? And I think politicians across the aisle are interested in figuring out how to smooth that transition, but we haven't gotten there yet, and it really would probably take investment to do that. But thank you for sharing that, and I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards.
I appreciate that answer because I kind of have a follow-up to that. So you mentioned the perception about SNAP benefit shoppers, and I'm wondering kind of your thoughts on the USDA's position to address some of the stigma and discrimination that's happening against SNAP shoppers and their ability to have a dignified experience when they're in their foodways.
So tell me more what you mean there.
So, there's a lot of dominant narratives about who is a SNAP shopper and kind of like what they should or should not be using with their benefits. And you kind of see the interactions in stores where people are judging what's in their food cart, or even, down to what the SNAP card looks like, that you're able to easily identify who a SNAP shopper is. I'm just wondering kind of your role and what you think will be in providing counter narratives to that and providing more opportunities for, again, SNAP shoppers to have a dignified experience as they navigate their foodways.
Yeah, I think you just defined what our role is and maybe gave us an assignment, which is the right one. We see a pendulum. I've been doing this a while, and there's a bit of a pendulum swing in public perception and public, what's the right way to say this? I guess their receptivity and sensitivity to need. So when you go through a very difficult time like the pandemic, and there are lines, at food banks, we saw those, photographs, right, of cars, or after a natural disaster, or during an economic downturn. Public sentiment swings towards being quite generous, and of course people need help, and we want to make sure families have what they need, and that sort of represents itself in the body politic and the policymakers. When the economy starts to improve, you can see there's still deep support. I want to be very clear that we, particularly around the issue of hunger, no one wants their neighbors to go hungry, but as just a general public opinion. But it can start to constrict a little bit, and it really does swing with the economy. And you often see pieces of legislation that are targeted at contracting or tightening, depending on, happening in better economic times, and legislation that is more expansive in worse economic times. So I think we're swinging in the better economic time. And so we have been very focused on, access and enroll, and another issue that was, and benefits are going up and the benefits are going down, and then also you may have heard SNAP benefits on your EBT card, your card, they're being copied and stolen, and then so families. So I think our heads have been in that game. But I think this is a good call to action, Penny, for us, which is we have lots of we've done this historically where we talk about what is SNAP's purpose, who's using it, why, how it supports good health, the unbelievable research history around it, and probably need to swing into that space a little bit more to offer our narrative on this incredible support and why families use it, right? And the number of working families who are using the program, seniors and kids, and fill in the blank space of who is a SNAP participant. It's a veteran, it's a working mom, it's a senior citizen who worked all her life but has a limited amount of income. And we're making sure that our neighbors are able to afford a healthy diet. So it's a good reminder. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Laura Kralik. I am in the environment and sustainability field on the second year, but I'm also a foster parent. And part of being a foster parent, as you know, you also get WIC benefits for women, infants, and children. So thank you very much. I just want to say thank you because it does help a lot of children. I take a lot of children into my home. And but the one comment that I do have is when you get WIC benefits, for instance, like formulas, you have to get a specific formula. And a lot of my children have special needs, and with that comes a lot of allergies because of their history and their past. And because of that, it makes it kind of difficult to change formulas sometime. And I hate to come with you with problems, but I just wanted to mention that you have to get a doctor's notice, which is quite the process. And that not only do you have to get the doctor's notice, it's quite often it feels like every month or 2 months I have to get a doctor's notice, and that's quite a trip to do. And I'm just wondering if in the future you see a future with current technology, being able to have some type of link from the doctor to say the WIC office, so that way the parent doesn't have to constantly go to the doctor's office. They could have some type of link of the doctor okays it and then it's done. I don't have to make a trip to the doctor's office, get the special form, fax it in, that sort of thing. So I was just wondering if you saw a future where technology could help in these areas.
Well, first of all, thank you. Sounds like you're doing an amazing thing for kids in your community. So, and see this woman over here in the white sweater and the dark glasses? She's right here. Raise your hand, Nancy. Nancy is a WIC expert, so I want to make sure you guys chat afterwards. But I think this is an example of where big public policy this is a good classroom question, and the friction for an individual who's just trying to feed her kid, right? So the reason we have, one of the things that WIC does or requires is that states actually put out for bid the formula that they're going to use in the WIC program. Now, 40% of the country's kids are on this program. So this is so in the state of Michigan, it's 40% of the kids who are going to use this formula. It's a big contract. And we have two, but mostly two to three, depending on infant formula manufacturers. So they compete to get Michigan's contract, and they offer a reduced price for the formula. And so the cost of WIC is much lower because of that. And so annually, we save about $1 billion a year because the states put the formula contracts out for bid. But it does mean that in each state, it's typically one brand, right? So it's, I'm going to forget them now because it's Similac, or it's Mead or Infamil. Yeah, the corporations don't match what's on the brand. I can't believe I'm forgetting this right now. I'm feeling terrible. I'm on this. I feel like I'm taking a test, and so it's coming back to me. But so because that happens, they're offering reduced prices. We get to serve so many more families because we have more money available. Now, if your child has a health issue, you can be prescribed out of being limited to what's available. The contract brand, as we call it. But what you're describing is that's you've got to demonstrate that you need to be out, and what does it take to demonstrate that you need that flexibility? And so you can see why we do it, right? Because it saves an enormous amount, and we can expand the reach of the program. And essentially, we serve every eligible child in WIC who shows up and there are very few programs that are financed that way. And yet here we have a mom who's just trying to do the right thing and now has to do, how many more phone calls or appointments, and already has a child with a health issue. So that's the tension, and sounds like we can do better by you. So I want to make sure you guys talk and that you understand all your options there. And I'm sure Michigan has some choices because everything is no choices in the documentation. But no, it's all right. I love your energy. I love it. It's okay. Right, it's the documentation requirements that are probably the issue here. But you're right. Like if you could just have your doctor talk to the WIC clinic and you say, I want to be out of this. You guys handle it, right? That sounds really good. So,
I don't know if this is so much of a question. I'm Linda Powell. As it is an observation, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm learning stuff that I don't know where to get that kind of information. And I wondered if there was something being done to alert the rest of the population of these kinds of things that are going on. I know Eating Well has some wonderful articles in it, and they did just recently on the urban farming, but I don't know where, unless I'm looking at the record for the University of Michigan about these types of things, I don't know where to get. It's not like readily available.
you mean what is it, like what we're doing, or the fact that all of this exists? Like the
fact that all of this exists, the costs of it, who's getting what. It always runs back in my head, and it's going to show my age, but we used to learn about Maslow's hierarchy, and if you don't get the bottom rung, you're not going to get the rest of the, and that's the security of the housing and the food and things like that. And there are so many groups that have money they want to give away, to things that are purposeful, and I don't know how they find out the information so they know where to do that.
Wow, yeah, you are right. I mean, there's a food system, there's a health system, there's a childcare system, and it's murky even for those of us living in each one of them. You're right. And so imagine you're someone without resources, you've just lost your job, and where do you go? If you haven't experienced the safety net before, and you just think, I need some help, it's not always clear. And I think you're right. We have to, and part of it is our structure, right? There's federal, state, local. Part of it is programs have popped up around need, and they're not always designed perfectly to create coherence. And an individual's experience can really depend upon the community that they're living in and how navigable it all is. But thank you. I think it's a really important observation. I talk about it like it's like, oh yeah, then you got this program, you got that program, and you weave it together this way, and that's not how it's experienced by people who are living it. And similarly, if you're a young, an emerging farmer, and I don't know what an emerging farmer means, but that's what we say. How do you navigate the infrastructure and the systems there they're there to help you support it, but you got a full-time job farming. How are you going to fill out all this paperwork? And so yes, it's a lot.
I think you're asking a bigger question than this, but one option too is we have a class at the University of Michigan for about the last 6 years that's free on Tuesday nights in the winter. So January, that last class is coming up next week through mid-April. It's called Food Literacy for All, and the whole point of it is to ensure that all of us are literate about all these different food systems issues. And so we bring speakers from all around the country, sometimes the world, a lot local as well, who talk about really critical issues in our food systems. And we make it open to the public because we really want everyone to see this as a fundamental topic that we should all be aware of. So they've been virtual for the last couple of years since COVID. So they're accessible now to also people all around the country. So Food Literacy for All, look it up. It's from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Tuesdays. And my parents are learning a lot from it, and didn't know a lot of what we cover. So, and then students, about 240, 230 students are taking it at the same time. We hopefully might one day bring it back in person, because it was really neat to have community members and students sitting literally, side by side and learning with one another. Did you have a question too?
Right.
So this is very granular and gets back to where you sort of started when you said that you had teenagers. And this is a question that is like asking, who is your favorite child? Who is your favorite child?
Oh, okay.
So when was the last time your team family was able to sit down together and celebrate with an adult beverage a win? Can you tell us what the most recent win was for your team?
Oh, that's such a nice question.
Oh, I want to know. I mean, there's serious stuff here, and I just want to hear.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to think. There's a couple that are a little personal, and I think they'd kill me if I shared. So I'm gonna. I would say one of my sons. He goes to Tulane, and he has been slogging it out in chemistry, like slogging it out and just trying so hard. And he was home for spring break, and all of us know that he's been it's been really hard. And he got a grade he was thrilled with in this chemistry test. And I think it wasn't so much that that it was the grade that mattered. It was just that he was so happy with how he did and that his work worked. So yes, we celebrated that. And that felt good. That felt really good. One, that we knew what he had been going through, but then he had a win, and that was really lovely. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking that. That was really nice.
I also have a question. Sorry. So this is kind of related to her question. I guess I'm wondering, and this is excuse my ignorance, but if you could talk a little bit about just what communication efforts exist in the USDA to kind of raise awareness and disseminate different things. I know this last year maybe? It might have been last year. I was on a working group for the Connecticut Department of Agriculture, and I was on the market access sub-working group. And a big issue that was coming up is these new farmers, there are certain resources that exist, but no one knows how to get to them. There's no one to answer the phone to tell them about it. So I'm just curious if there have been any moves or thoughts about how you can increase just communication about resources or whatever.
Sure. Well, if you go to our website, you go to Food and Nutrition Service, there's probably 20 newsletters you could sign up for. Midwest region has one where they put out every quarter. Is it called A Place at the Table? Is that, yes. At the table, sorry. That gives you news, shares news and information, for example, just about this region, but you can sign up for our Farm to School newsletter, our Team Nutrition newsletter. We've got newsletters. You can express interest in a particular program. I promise you we will not bombard you unless you sign up for all of them. And the same is true across USDA. Now, of course, you'd have to know that there's a program of interest to you, but and then go sign up for the information. I also would encourage you to follow us on X and Instagram, where we try to have more of a little, it's still government, so don't get too excited, but we try to have a little bit of a conversation where we're celebrating some of the folks who are delivering the programs and talk about some of these issues. But definitely if you're interested, check out our website and go for how to get news from us. We put out a lot of content. We have a blog that I'm not sure how many people read, but we try to get the word out.
And actually now I'm inspired by that question. And so I remember you mentioned contracting out with these more community-based organizations. And so I'm curious if part of their role is also locally disseminating more information about USDA programs that are relevant for stakeholders?
Well, a great example of one of these is actually a program we are doing with FRAC, where FNS contracted with FRAC to so WIC is run by states and then in some cases local agencies. We're only serving about half of eligible families with kids. I mean, here's this amazing public health intervention. It gives food purchasing power to households. We got to try to reach more eligible kids. And so we were working with states to do that, but we decided that we also needed to go directly to communities, and so are working with FRAC, who's then re-granting to community-based organizations, and they're different all around the country. One might be, I was just with one in Maine that's working in a hospital setting to work with a refugee community. There's one in North Carolina working with military families who, because they move around a lot, may not know about WIC. So there are all these different projects. And the idea is that we will learn, you meet one community, but that we try to lift that up and think about the way of giving the money, the who we partnered with. Right, there's a lot of really great evaluation work and so then we can the next time ideally we're giving states money to do outreach, we're thinking about what did we learn about the how of that, so that when they're not, that they're open to. One of the things you learn about outreach is the way you're doing it isn't working so well, right? So that you've got to figure out how you open your doors wider. So how do you do the granting on that? So that's an example of what, because we work through states, we don't normally have a direct collaboration with the whoever's running a summer feeding site or doing WIC outreach. But we need to change that if we're going to be better at designing our programs. So that's where some of this flexible money, we're trying to use it to learn, to step outside of the lane for a little bit.
Exciting, thanks.
So this is just another question on the horizon. We do not yet have a new farm bill. And it's not looking like we're going to have a farm bill until we have a new president. We don't know how that's going to turn out. And we do know that if we have a new administration and if they are Republican, it is less likely to have some of these programs that we just talked about. And it's clear that if you are for these programs, you need to vote a certain way. But being that if it is a Republican that is in office, how do you think diplomacy can be done and mobilized to ensure that all people have equitable access to food? Because it shouldn't just be you have to pick one side or the other for that. And I know this is a big question. But you're on the Hill. So how can we help you, and hopefully you still have that position, or know the next person in that position, to ensure that food is accessible and continues to make better strides to be more equitable?
Well, okay, so this is actually, in my career, my 6th farm bill, and so, but the first one where I'm in the, I guess, in the executive branch and kind of out of it in a way, because we do our thing. Congress has to write I want to be really clear. It's their job, and we're working to help them, but really respect their constitutional requirement is to write the legislation. Listen, farm bills are bipartisan. They have to be. They can't pass. I'm sure you've talked about this in your class, just because of who supports them. There just aren't. They have to be bipartisan. And so there is this rural-urban coalition in the House, and then the Senate. Of course, every senator is a rural senator. So I do think that. No conversation is counted out because of its inherently bipartisan nature, and part of the way you got to talk. You have this phenomenal senator with an incredible perch of power right now in terms of Chair Stabenow and the agriculture. She's leaving, which is heartbreaking. I just adore her. Just personally really adore her. But I'm sure she'll have some advice about how to think about it. But I think part of it is, showing the effectiveness of it. And what you are talking about is community investment. It's good for the local economy. It's good for farmers. It's good for rural, urban. It just feels like there's a lot of power there. That's why you're so passionate about it. I am pretty. So listen, you can't do everything in every bill, and also you don't just have to do it in the Farm Bill. Bills pass all the time. Why can't they also be about urban agriculture? There's appropriations. Sometimes there's big tax bills that move. You got to get in the game for your issue, not for the bill. That would be my piece of it. Taking my executive branch hat off. It sounds like you're passionate and you got a strong story to tell. So why limit yourself to a once every 5-year bill?
We're going to end about 10 minutes, so we're just going to take 2 more questions.
Hi.
Hi, again.
I just had one more question, and I guess kind of centered on this conversation about addressing systemic racism. I just wondered if you could speak to kind of what's being done about college student hunger. I feel like a lot of opportunity is missed because we're having to pick maybe working extra hours or being truly invested in education. And I know that there's certain stipulations that don't allow college students to access some of the FNS programs. And so I just wondered if you could speak to conversations that are happening to address hunger in this space and in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you're talking about is that SNAP has some restrictions on, they're very complex rules on college student eligibility, and they were written in the 80s to deal with what then was, I think, a concern that kids like my kids who are temporarily, they appear low income. I'm supporting them, right, but they appear low income, let's say on a tax return, and therefore we're gaining access to SNAP. But so they weren't. So the idea was, okay, we've got to create rules to make them ineligible. But some, I think, really believe that the rules went too far, and that also that our some policymakers' view of what a college student is not reflective of who is seeking higher ed, which is much older adults, often with caregiving responsibilities, often working, and often struggling. So why shouldn't SNAP be available to them? And during the pandemic, some of the college student rules were eased to open up the program. And now those rules have gone away, and we're seeing people are feeling the challenge of that. I do think the bigger issue here is, of course, the affordability of college, right? Like, maybe if college were affordable, we wouldn't be worried about food assistance for college students. So, and that is a bit, yeah, well, and to your scholarships, right? So the administration clearly, had a pretty strong view on that for, making community college free of charge and dealing with student debt and really trying to deal with the affordability issue. And that, hasn't gone as far as the president would have liked. So given the sort of, I don't think Congress, we'll see where a Farm Bill goes. I do know a lot of people are talking about college student eligibility there, and again, that's up to Congress. But in the meantime, one of the things we're trying to do is collaborate with the Department of Education, who, through their student loan programs, has visibility into who are kids who have zero expected family contribution, and who are the ones getting Pell Grants, so that we can make sure we are communicating directly with those students about the availability of programs. What are the rules? How do they go about applying? Because many of them will be eligible. So I think we're going to try and work on the demystification and the confusion side of things to make sure that eligible students are applying. And then it will really take Congress to do something about affordability, which is the real issue, as well as other forms of support that are available to college students. So thank you. It's a great question.
I have another question. While I was working at FRACT, we worked really closely with New Mexico Appleseed and also with the Intertribal Agriculture Council around native sovereignty and the child nutrition programs, which is something I'm really glad that you mentioned that, and I was really interested to hear you talk a little bit more about USDA's commitment to tribal sovereignty. When in our conversations with those organizations and with tribes, tribes are really eager to. They've demonstrated that they are more than capable of operating WIC programs like WIC, and they're eager to operate other federal nutrition programs as well, especially in tribes who their tribal lands straddle state lines, and they have to work with 2 different state governments and state agencies who are helping them administer these programs. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about USDA's commitment to tribal sovereignty, especially when it comes to these programs and helping tribes carry out the programs themselves.
Sure. So I think you're talking about, well, we'll just talk about school meals right now. So school meal, right, the way the law is written is states have state child nutrition agencies and then local school districts. And the definition is basically the way you would think of a school district, although it can be an independent school. That have school cafeterias. We help subsidize the program, but also set standards for what the program should be. But now we're going to connect the dots here because this year in our budget bill, our FY24 budget bill that just passed, even though it was supposed to pass in October, it's about 5 months late. So, but it has in it a rider, a freestanding piece of law that instructs us to work on a pilot project for up to, I believe, 10 tribes that would want to take over the role of being a state or working as a school district to run the school meals program. And the reason I'm connecting the dots is the chairman of our committee is from New Mexico. I'm pretty sure he heard from that New Mexico group and that intertribal ag group, and so he created a pilot which normally would have had to have been in a big authorizing bill. But the point is, you can obviously it worked here. So that, I think we're really looking forward to that. The interesting thing there, though, is, of course, lining up all the stacks. So you've got to have a school district, right? The tribe can't, let's take Ann Arbor. Let's say the tribe is in Ypsilanti, or I can't think about that. Sorry, I'm going to get my geography wrong. But in the Ann Arbor public schools, let's say there was a tribe that existed within Ann Arbor. That tribe kind of can't say, okay, I'm walking into that school that's owned by the Ann Arbor School District, and I'm going to take over running the food there because that has a lot of kids from our reservation that attend that school. Right? You've got a huge jurisdictional problem there. So what we need to do is find, for example, a Bureau of Indian Affairs school or tribal school that is already running the cafeteria and wants to take over as the state agency and basically have more governance over the program. So we're working to figure that out. I think it's just a great example of it'll give us experience and tribes experience of how this would work so that we ideally can pursue more authorization in the future. So that's a very hopeful thing to end on. So thank you for that. And a great example for how you don't have to wait for these at once every 5 to 10 year bills to start to pursue change.
Well, thank you so much again for all the work you're doing, and I learned a ton today about how all the different things you're doing. So I'm going to build this into my classes in the future. And we have the video, so if anybody missed it that would love to watch this, we'll be putting it up on our website. The Sustainable Food Systems Initiative has a video library of all our Food Literacy for All videos if you want to sit and watch for many hours, and we're going to add this. But we're excited to be able to share everything that you shared with us today. Thank you so much for all your time and coming all the way out here. And thank you again, both Carlina and Frankie, for taking this on. We appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for the team for together.
Thank you both. Really appreciate it.